And just like that, here we are. We're rolling. We're live wherever you are, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day that it is. As always, I'm really glad to be here, have a little time to share with you, have a spiritual lunch or dinner or snack, whatever, again, time of day it might be where you are. Living Faith Live, that's who we are. And today, I heard a phrase over and over again, this week in particular, from someone who kept saying, count it all joy, count it all joy. And their reference was to the difficulties and challenges that they and other people were facing in their lives right now. So they kept saying, count it all joy, count it all joy. And that term comes from the scriptures. It comes from the book of James, chapter 1. So I'm going to read you, first of all, from James, chapter 1, verses 2 through 8. And then we'll talk about it. Here's what James wrote. He said, "Consider it pure joy, my brethren," my brothers and sisters, "whenever you face trials, difficulties, challenges of any kind, knowing that the testing of your faith will work patience. Let patience finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." Verse 5, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all and without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed about with the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and therefore unstable in everything that they do." James chapter 1, verses 2 through 8. Now, the book of James is not for wimps. I'm going to tell you something right now. James tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter, in-your-face kind of guy when it comes to spiritual matters. And James begins by saying, "Consider it as pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face numerous trials or various trials or different kinds of trials." Now, that in itself is pretty startling, because when you're going through difficulty, when you're between a rock and a hard place, you usually don't think of it as a time of joy. You're not really happy usually when things aren't going very well. And as I have mentioned before, there's a big difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is a product of emotions. Things make you feel good, you're happy. Things make you feel bad, you're sad. Happiness, sadness, those are emotions. But joy, at least the joy that I'm speaking of, the biblical, spiritual joy that we're talking about, is a spiritual force. It's supernatural, and it's an energy, if you will, that comes from within. So James is saying, count it as joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of any kind. Count it as joy. So I'm going to make 4 points, I believe, today. And so number 1 is be joyful in your trying times. Be joyful in your trying times. Now, the word consider in this verse, where it says, consider it pure joy, my brethren, my brothers and sisters, when you fall into difficulties, when you fall into tests and trials. That word consider, it's a financial word, if you will. It has to do with counting or evaluating or considering something. So what James is giving us here is encouragement when we're in a difficult place, whether it's an emotional difficulty, a financial difficulty, maybe we're going through trauma, whatever the tests and trials that life visits upon us happen to be at the moment, we're to consider what we're going through, and we're to evaluate what we're going through. And the purpose of this, this consideration or this evaluation is so that our outlook, our perspective during this time of testing and trial will be correct. So we'll have the right attitude as we face the difficulty, the challenge, whatever it might be that, maybe you're facing right now at this moment. So consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, when you face tests and trials of any kind. But what I want to say is that the point here is not that in considering our test and trial and evaluating our test and trial, that we should pretend to be happy when we're facing pain and difficulty. That we should pretend, everything's fine, I'm happy, and really we're dying inside, or we're struggling, or we're going through turmoil, see. So it's not about faking happiness, because again, happiness is an emotional response, and tests and trials are going to make us unhappy quite often, if not all the time. So it's not about faking happiness. It's about having a perspective, a positive outlook. That's right, a positive outlook toward this trial, this test that is going on in my life right now. Consider it joy, because this trial, maybe we can't see it right now, but this trial can and will, if we let it, produce something positive in our lives. James tells us that we should learn to turn times of hardship into times of learning. And these trials and these tribulations will produce something in our life while our faith is being tested. And our faith is being tested in a trial. Think about it. When you're going through difficulty, and I'm not talking about little annoyances like you're stuck at a red light or somebody's going too slow in the left lane. Some people think that's a trial, that's a test of their faith. No, it's not. A genuine test of faith, that's those bone-crushing, gut-wrenching experiences you're having. Maybe someone has died and you just don't understand it. And you're just having a difficult time coming to grips with it. Maybe you've had a loss, a great loss in your life, financially or materially or physically, and you're just having a struggle. It's a trial. It's a challenge. You can't come to grips with this. And you're questioning God. You're questioning your belief system. Your faith is stretched thin and maybe at the breaking point. You're going through a trial at this moment in time that is testing your faith. And, the outcome is one of two things. You're going to fold the deck and give up, and there goes your faith in God, or you are going to persevere. You are going to endure. You are going to have steadfastness in the trial. And that brings me to point number 2. See, point number 1, again, was to be joyful in these times of trial. But point number 2 is to remember that these trials will produce patience in our lives. That's right. These trials will produce patience in our lives because, well, let me read the verse from James chapter 1. It's verse 3. Here's what James said. He said, "You know that the testing of your faith will produce patience." And then in verse 4 he says, "But let patience finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking in anything." Boy, I don't know about you, but you have to chew on that verse a bit. It's like a really good piece of steak, if that's your preference, or chicken or fish or whatever your favorite thing to chew on is, you have to savor it one bite at a time. James said, the testing of your faith, when your faith is being stretched, when you're questioning God, when you're going through that difficulty and you're doing all you can to hang on to your faith, in those moments, you will learn something. You will learn patience. And in a moment, I'll elaborate on that word patience a little bit. This production of patience, though, must be allowed to finish its work. That's what it says in verse 4. Patience has a work to do as you're developing it, and you must allow it to finish that work, because in the process, these tests and trials mature you. They grow you up. They make you a man or a woman of character. And in the end, they complete you. And you will not lack in any good thing when you let this process play out in your life. God wants to produce patience in our lives. Yes, He does. But that word translated here as patience actually means a lot more than just being in a hurry. And I say that because I know many, many people, when somebody says be patient, and in your mind you think about, I'm being patient. I'm just being as patient as I can. My patience are wearing a little thin here. I wish we could get on with this. I wish he'd hurry up. I wish he'd shut up. Anyway, patience, that's one way of looking at the word, but the word here actually means so much more than the patience that we talk about when we're talking about just being in a hurry, okay? It has to do, this word that James used here, it has to do with, and it's more often translated in Scripture as endurance or steadfastness or perseverance, okay? Endurance, steadfastness, or perseverance. And the tough times that we go through in life can teach us how to persevere and how to be a person who endures. And both of these are qualities that God wants to develop in us. God doesn't want us to be weak and wimpy in the face of our difficulties. God, hear me, God is in the business of building tough people. And to be a real follower of God, a real Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ, it takes a tough person. It takes an enduring, steadfast, patient person to persevere and to not grow weary and faint and lose their faith in the midst of tests and trials, in the midst of difficulties in this life, okay? God is looking for men and women to call and to choose who are in this for the long haul. not Sunday go-to-meeting saints, not fair weather believers, but those who are in it for the long haul. Okay? So remember now, trials have a purpose, and we have to let them fulfill that purpose in our life. They have to build within us patience, endurance, steadfastness, the things that make us strong. Number 3 from these verses now. Trials require wisdom. Trials require wisdom. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why James began by saying, consider, evaluate these tests and trials. Why? So that we can be sure we have the wisdom to face the difficulty, face the loss, face the hurt and the pain. In verse 5, here from James chapter 1, let me read it again. It says, if any of you, hey, look at me now, you, if any of you, that's right, any one of you, okay, if any of you lack wisdom, ask God, who gives wisdom generously to all who ask, without finding fault, and it will be given to you. I always found that verse interesting, especially the part that says, God gives wisdom generously, and he doesn't fault find. He doesn't find fault when you ask. And I think about that because I know, especially when your patients are a little thin with someone who's maybe asking you a lot of questions, you start getting nitpicky about it. Oh, what do you want? I mean, what do you want now? You've asked me 50 times. That's not God. God will give wisdom where there's a lack of wisdom. He'll give it abundantly and generously, and he won't find any fault. He will just give you the wisdom that you seek him for and that you ask him for. Now, someone might be thinking, okay, so you're explaining this, but I'm still not getting, what does wisdom have to do with these tests and trials that we go through in life? And I would submit to you that wisdom has everything to do with making it through difficulties, making it through tests and trials in our lives. We need wisdom so that we can know how to respond to whatever it is that we are going through. Wisdom is an important asset for us when we deal with trials. In fact, wisdom is what gets us through because we deal wisely with the trial, okay? But here's something important. We're not talking about just any old wisdom here, okay? Not just any old wisdom. This world is full of so-called good advice. Advice is cheap. It's being distributed everywhere you look. Somebody's advising you. This is how you should do it. This is the way you should live. Try this. Do that. See? Now, that good advice is better known from a biblical perspective as the wisdom of man. The wisdom of man. And God doesn't want us to rely solely on human wisdom. There's a place for it. But God is more concerned, especially when we're going through difficulties, that we seek him for his wisdom. Because his wisdom, which is his perspective, which is the only correct perspective, I might add, his wisdom is what we truly need. And I'm not going to read it here now, but take some time and read from the Older Testament book of Proverbs. the first 9 chapters. The first 9 chapters. And you will find in those chapters the makings of godly wisdom. And in those chapters, you will learn the importance of things like wise instruction. I mean, where do you get your instruction from? Is it wise instruction? See, you will learn the importance of understanding and how important it is. In fact, in some respects, understanding is more important than just plain wisdom. Because if you don't understand the wisdom being shared, you can't apply that wisdom to your life. You need to understand in order to apply wisdom, okay? You'll learn about prudence and discretion and about real, genuine knowledge. And you'll also learn about discernment. And there's something that's sorely missing, lacking in today's world. Discernment. Okay. So read Proverbs chapter 1, verse 9. Because all of those things I mentioned are important qualities for us to have. They're essential qualities, I might add, when we are going through one of life's tests or one of life's trials. And that brings me to number 4. And we will find this point in the remaining verses, James chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. So point 4, wisdom comes from God in response to a sincere faith. Ooh, this is an important one. You want to write that down? If you don't remember anything else I talk about today, please remember this. When you ask for God, anything from God, but we're talking about wisdom right now, but I mean this goes for anything you ask in prayer. Anything that you ask when you are talking to God. And remember, prayer is talking to God. That's all it is. Talking to God and listening. But when you ask for wisdom, that wisdom will come. The response will come. The answer will come only if you ask in genuine, sincere faith. And that is astronomically important. Now let me read the verses. James says, "But when you ask God, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." Verse 7, that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. I'll get back to that. Verse 8, such a person, what kind of person? A person who doubts, who does not ask in sincere faith. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Now listen. That's the end of the 8th verse there. Listen to me. I know sometimes when you read verses like this, or when you hear somebody like me read them, and if you're going through difficulty, you think, oh, okay, so now I'm double-minded. Now I'm unstable. Well, of course, I'm a mess. I know I'm a mess. This isn't meant to condemn you. This is not an indictment against you, unless you're just so stiff-necked and hard of heart that you just won't listen. This is meant to open your eyes and help you. James is saying, number one, you want God to give you wisdom? You want God to answer your prayers? You want God to do those things that you desire with all your heart, and that you know are right, and that you know are in agreement with His will, and that's why you're asking in the first place? Well, be sure you're not harboring doubts inside of you. You're not saying, yeah, I'm going to pray, but I really don't think God's going to hear me. I really don't think I'm going to. You watch, it won't happen. I prayed before and I didn't get an answer, so I don't even know why, but I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. But, that double-mindedness makes you an unstable man or woman. It brings instability into everything you do and everything you say in your life. Now, James says to get wisdom, and he said all we need to do to get that wisdom is to ask God for it, but emphasizes again that we must ask with that unwavering faith, that unwavering belief that God hears me and God will answer me. In His time, He will manifest what I need. And when we're tempted to doubt, we doubt the doubts, not the faith. Okay? Faith. Trust. It's another word for faith. Trust in God. Faith in God is essential if we expect to receive anything from God. Jesus, He said that the condition for receiving anything in prayer is that we must believe that we have received it first. And I've talked about that before. So when we're talking to God, we must believe that we receive it. Listen, I'll quote the verse here. It comes from Mark 11:24. And in verse 11, Mark 11, verse 23, I'm not going to read it here, but if you recall that 23rd verse from Mark's Gospel, the 11th chapter, he said, ask, speak, and do not doubt in your heart. So in verse 23, Jesus dealt with doubt in our heart. But here in verse 24, here's the quote. Jesus said, therefore, I say to you, whatever thing, whatever you ask, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them. Did you hear me? Whatever you ask, you must believe that you receive, and then you will receive. That's so very important. Now let's get back to James. James said, no doubting. No. No doubting. No doubt. Yeah, but no, yeah, buts. Well, no, well, knows. Okay. No doubting. That's what James said. And why? Because the person who doubts is double-minded. Is double-minded. That's an interesting word that James chose here. The word literally means two-souled. A person of two souls. And your soul, we talk about the soul, we talk about the spirit of man. Man is a spirit. Man has a soul, and it's contained, his spirit and soul are contained in this physical body, this machine created by God that we're walking around in. So, this two-souled person, soul now, the part of you that contains your intellect, your will, and your emotions. And I know I'm laboring this a bit, but I really want you to think about this. So your soul is the part of you where your intelligence, your intellect exists. It's the part of you where your will is located. And it's the part of you that contains all of your various emotions. That's the soulish realm of the human person. So, when we are full of doubt, it is like our soul, the soulish part of us, our mind, our will, and emotions, it's like that part of us is in a tug of war with itself. A tug of war with itself. I can remember back to my youth and to picnics, and one of the things we used to do there was have a tug of war. Don't really hear about people doing that very much anymore, but I'm sure some people still do. But you'd find some place at the park. We used to try to find a muddy area, a marshy area, and we'd string a rope across this muddy, yucky, marshy spot, and then you'd have two teams. And one team would be on one side, and everybody would grab a hold of the rope. And on the other side, everybody would grab a hold of that side of the rope. And the goal here was to pull against the other team, and to pull and to pull and to struggle and to pull until you pulled one team into the mud, or pulled them over, or caused them to let go, or whatever the rules were. But the point is, the struggle is what I kind of want to hone in on here. You're struggling, pulling against your opponents, but in this case, the tug of war is with yourself. Double-mindedness is a tug of war with yourself. Double-mindedness is when you're full of opposing thoughts, conflicting emotions, choosing to believe God and then not believing God, and then believing God and then not believing God. Back and forth, up and down, emotions high, low, thoughts good and bad, trusting God, full of doubt. See, that double-mindedness makes us unstable, and no wonder James said, a double-minded man or a double-minded woman is unstable in all of his or her ways, and let not that person think they will receive anything from God. And I know that seems a bit harsh, and I know some people don't like that, and they say, well, God can't be that way. He would just have pity on me and give it to me even though I don't believe him at all. No, I'm sorry, that's not what it says here. That's not rightly dividing the word. The Bible teaches us that the answer to prayer is contingent upon your faith. Are you really trusting God? Do you really believe God? Are you really holding on? Are you really letting these difficult times and these challenges that you go through from time to time teach you to endure and to have patience and to be steadfast and unmovable when your faith is being tested? You're not giving up. You're not throwing in the spiritual towel and turning your back on the things you believe, but you're holding on in faith. A double-minded man and a double-minded woman, unstable in all their ways, not going to do well in the tests and the trials. But when we ask God for his wisdom to face these difficulties in life, that wisdom is what will help us to navigate, to chart the course, and then navigate that course through the difficulties and the challenges until we reach some calm seas once again, or pull into a protected port, whatever it may be. God wants us to have his wisdom, and the way to get his wisdom is through single-minded faith. So, count it all joy. Meaning, look at the situation not as your defeat, not as, oh, here we go again, I'm really going. No, look at it, and as difficult as this may be, and as terrible as the situation may be, look at it and just kind of look at it and say, I don't want to deal with this, but I'm going to count it joy, the joy of the Lord, because that's my strength, the inner joy, that spiritual force. I'm going to let that rise up in me because I know that with God, nothing is impossible. I know that with God, I can walk through this valley. I know that with God, the wisdom He will give me will allow me to get through this time of challenge and adversity in my life and come out a winner and triumph in the midst of a very, very dark situation. So I'm going to count it all joy, even though that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense at the moment. Okay. Well, my friends, that brings our time for today to a close. I pray that the God of peace, the God of love, the God of all joy will be with you today. And I pray that your heart will be uplifted, that you'll face this day and this week and this month and this year with the joy of the Lord, knowing that you are going to make it. I mean that sincerely today. Please hit the like. Please subscribe if you're watching this on our YouTube channel. Please share liberally so that others might be helped. And please come back again the next time for more Living Faith Live. Till then, may the Lord richly bless you, my friends.